So today hopefully is the day that I've been looking forward to for 4, 5, 6 years. Today I'm hoping to drive the 1932 Chevy two-door sedan off the hoist, and that's about as far as it's going to go, but it's going to move 100 on power, hopefully. We'll see what happens. The brakes are all bled, working. Had a little bit of issue figuring that out, mostly my fault. That's what happens when you change directions mid-build and parts don't want to work together anymore. But they work. I got them pretty good, I think. So hopefully I won't be crashing into anything, because I'd really hate to rebuild this car again. So let's see. We'll see if it fires up after a couple of months of not having it running. We'll see, go for there. A little smoky. I'm not going to be too concerned with it yet. That engine was turned upside down for months as I was going through and cleaning everything. And then, turning it back around. Everything is fresh in that thing. It's running rich. So obviously there's going to be some tuning and figuring some stuff out. But yeah, it moved. I noticed at the end had a little bit of trouble. I had to give it some throttle to keep it moving, so I'm guessing transmission fluid is probably a little low. And that's because, again, transmission pan was off. It's got a new torque converter in it, which I did fill before I put it in. Man, my eyes are burning. It's good though. It's good. But yeah, new torque converter, so it's still getting full. But on a good note, when I checked it before, the dipstick showed that it was mostly full. And now it's showing that it's low. So I know that the pump is working. So that's good. The pump is working and engaged. So that's good. Brakes work really, really well, even though I don't have the power assist hooked up right now. But I am going to open some doors, make me breathe in a little less of these fumes, because I'm probably getting more dumber by the minute. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. Hey everyone, Thanks for watching, first off. So I'm going to do a little bit of a intro with this particular car. For those of you that may not know the car, may not know the family history behind it. So I'll just jump right into it. In 1968, my father first found this car sitting on the side of the street with a for sale sign. It was an old street race car, one of 4 31 to 32 Chevrolets that were in the Grand Forks, North Dakota area at the time. There was one named Scatter, one named Scamper, one named Viking 1, and one named Viking 2. I need to find out more history about those other 3 cars. I do know that Scatter is back in the hands of the original owner from the 60s, which is very cool. I'm actually friends with him on Facebook. The other 2, I'm not sure whatever happened to them. This one, when my dad found it, it was for sale for, like, I want to say $300. Dad didn't have the money, so he told his best friend about it. Lo and behold, his best friend ends up buying it and playing around with it for a little while. And shortly after my parents got married, this friend of my dad's was living with them, and my dad comes home from work one day, and he hears this friend of his saying on the phone, saying, yeah, I'd probably sell that, and hangs up. And my dad asks him, what were you selling? He said, well, that old Chevy. My dad piped up and said, hey, I let you buy that when I couldn't, so give me the first shot at it. So he did, and so for a little bit of extra money and some owed rent, my dad was able to acquire this car. So after my parents bought the car, they really had no business owning it. We were not well off, to say the least. Although my dad took care of the family first, and this car sat in the background for many years while he was raising my older sister and I. And a few years later, he got the opportunity to move to another town for a better job. And so we did. And of course, car came along with us. Moving to this new town, there was a dealership. And somehow my dad was able to get the paint booth that they were retiring out of the dealership, and he and my mom bolted this thing together in our backyard so that they would have some place to work on this car. Mind you, this is northern Minnesota. In the winters, especially back in the late 70s, they're brutal. They're not good. And they had only a kerosene furnace in that little tiny tin shed, basically, to build this car. And they did. So I was too young to really remember, but the story goes is that after supper, my mom and dad would go into the garage and leave my older sister to watch over me. And they would work till 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night working on this car. And again, they had nothing but hand tools to build this. They didn't have an air compressor. They didn't have a welder. They didn't have anything. To this day, I'm amazed that they were able to build it. They didn't have a torch. Anything that they needed cut or welded, my dad would figure out a way to mock it up and then bring it to work the next day and have one of the guys at the shop weld it up for him. Then he'd bring it back that night and hopefully it worked. And if not, bring it back and fix it and do it again. So this went on for several years, through a lot of cold winters in the early 80s, I believe it was 1982. One of the guys that my dad had worked with at the dealership was a painter and offered to paint this car. And I came across the receipt to paint this car. And mind you, this was Dad getting a deal because he was a friend and whatnot. And I believe the receipt that I found was $285 to paint this car metal flake gold, and then it had dark brown metallic fenders. So finally got it painted, and my mom was there to witness the car coming out of the paint booth out into the sunlight for the very first time, and she made the comment that it looks like the sun is dancing on it. Hence the name Sundance. So now that the car has been painted, they bring it back to their garage and finish putting it together. The only thing that they sourced out was having the seats upholstered. All of their other parts of the interior, they figured out a way to upholster themselves, and I still have pieces of, I'm not kidding you, cardboard that they wrapped in brown crushed velour or crushed velvet, and it was done. It was a street rod. It was a cool old car, and in that form, it went on a lot of road trips, especially that first couple of years. Dad was super proud of it, as he should, and they went to a lot of car shows. Did actually very well. I still have most of the trophies that the car has brought home. And then after a couple years, my sister and I were getting older and more involved in not sports, but school-related activities. And, you know, my mom started working full-time, we just got busy. But the car was always in the garage. It was always a part of our life. There's even some pictures that I have of, and I remember the day, it was a New Year's Eve in the mid-80s, and it was just a beautiful snowing day, but it was in the high 30s or somewhere in there, and it was just a neat, picturesque day, and we decided to take the 32 out on New Year's Day. Probably shouldn't have with salt and all that, but the car is still here, obviously, so obviously damage wasn't really done. It was just a good memory. And then I got to the age where I was getting into cars, you know, getting my driver's license. During about that time, I started getting into having a heavy interest, more so in the car than I was when I did as a younger kid. And so I started working on it, what was, you know, little things that were here and there, needed maintenance and whatnot. In the late 90s, rust was starting to come through on the lower bottoms of the doors. And we decided we didn't have money to redo it, as we never had. And we decided just to scuff it and shoot it flat black, that was something back in 1996, to have a flat black car. And as we were doing it, we were joking about how, now watch, METALFLAKE is going to make a huge comeback, and we laughed. And so we painted it flat black, and then it got some flames a few years later, and then Dad had always wanted the car yellow for some reason. And we painted it yellow for him for a few years, and that was longer than we had intended it to be yellow. But he was happy, and he put a lot of miles on that car. In fact, we had a 60th surprise birthday party for my father, and we had convinced him to somehow show up to this event with the car, even though it was in November. And the night on the way home from the party to his house, the car tripped 60,000 miles on the odometer on his 60th birthday. So that's kind of a neat little anecdote of the car. Fast forward to about 2015. My wife and I had just bought this place. We had been looking for a place for me to be able to work on all my stuff. And Dad had bought a new Heights Super Ride front suspension for the car. And so we got to the point where we could actually put some money towards the car and make the improvements that it was desperately needing. It was still the stock axle up front, stock springs, even had drum brakes at the front from a 54 Chevrolet. The wiring harness was out of a junkyard Impala from the 60s. It was just time. It was tired. It was having issues. It no longer was the car that you could just blindly jump into and head across 2.5 states and not even think about it. So we brought it here once the independent front suspension was put in. And triggering that, we ended up having to upgrade the brake booster, of course, because now I was going to disc brakes and he wanted power assist. So sure, that sounds fine, no big deal. Well, once I got home and I opened up the car and tried to figure out how I was going to mount this booster, it became very clear to me the car is going to need a lot of surgery. And all of the wood inside the car was completely rotted. Here is some photo of, this is the A-pillar that was holding the driver's door up, if you could believe it or not. So I decided it was time to go through this car 100%. So first thing was I pulled all the wood out of the car, and here's a picture of the sub rails versus the new sub rails that I fabricated, and was able to finally start putting everything back together. And so that's just taken over the course of 4 or 5 years. Obviously other things have gotten in the way. I bought the 58 Chevy. My mother unfortunately passed away in 2017. So that still is tough. It took me about a year to even look at the car. But I did. And I started going on it pretty hard in the years later, and especially in the last 6 months, realizing that, so since it's a 1932 Chevy, this is 2002, this is 2022, it's the 90th birthday of the car. And almost more importantly to us, that this is the 50th year my father has owned the car. And it'll be 40 years this year since the car debuted for the first time. So I'm really hustling, trying to get the car back on the road this year for Dad to enjoy for all of those anniversaries. I think it's going to happen. I don't think I'll be getting into paint before the end of the season, just because I'd like to get some miles on it before a final paint, just to make sure everything's okay. There's a lot of elements that went into this car, and it wouldn't take much for something to go wrong, and I would have to do some major work, and I don't want to be doing that on a freshly painted car. We have a floating appointment with the upholstery shop. That is Jay's Custom Upholstery down in Pine River, Minnesota. He's willing to take this on in late fall, early winter of this year. So hopefully this time next year, this will be essentially a done car. Full paint, full interior, and we'll be able to really enjoy it again. Mainly let my dad enjoy it again. I know he's been a bit bummed these last 5 years of not having a car. Especially, you know, at big events like Back to the 50s is a must go to for us, especially since it's literally 40 minutes from our house. But yeah, so that's kind of where we're at. We're trying to catch you up on what we've done to this car, what I've done to this car. The history of the car is what really is most important about it, I think. The fact that this has actually been a family member of our family longer than I have means it means a lot to us. And I'm sure if you know us and know our family, you're well aware of the sentimental value that this car has that we could never put a value on. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. Maybe a few pictures of what it used to look like. All right, well, thanks for watching. And of course, hit like and subscribe.